Hey friends, welcome back to AI Empowered series, the complete guide to AI to enhance your personal and professional lives with practical knowledge and skills. Today, we're going to be talking about context. And I know that we've discussed context in previous modules, but we're really going to be diving deep into something very useful to know about how context functions within a longer AI conversation or collaboration session. I'm going to provide a context management system that transforms AI from sort of this forgetful, going off the rails assistant to a real strategic partner that really maintains memory of what you've been doing and is continuously helpful and improves itself. So I think most professionals lose this critical information and the AI starts to veer off track. It's sort of a drift that occurs that is not that noticeable unless you know what to look for, and you can get yourself into some trouble by losing context that is really helping you get the quality that you want, and therefore your quality starts to drift. And so I'm going to propose this question to you. What if the reason why your AI conversations are frustrating or repetitive isn't just because it has these limited capabilities, but because you're missing something key about these conversations with AI, especially over a longer period of time? So I want you to really start to think about this context management in an expert way so that you can maintain these strategic conversations and the quality that you're enjoying from AI. This framework is really going to help you do that. And by the end of this video, you'll be able to manage context effectively so that it enables that sort of complex, continuous collaboration. You might strike gold with getting the right prompt at the right time to get a really amazing result. Then you keep working with it and the context window starts to drift. And then you lose that magic moment with AI where it gave you what you need and you can't recreate it because of the way that the context functions within this memory of AI. This context setting, why does AI hit these walls? When you're building your prompt engineering skills, you can craft that excellent prompts and have a sustainable way of increasing productivity. And if you don't understand how AI memory works, then it can only go so far. So AI operates with a limited context window. And you'll see this talked about in the different models that you use. They used to be maybe 10,000 context tokens, now 100,000, now 200,000. So they're getting larger, but they're still really important to be able to manage. And actually, when they get bigger, it's important to know when things are in context. It's always something that you need to manage. So this is a really important concept for you to understand to get continuous results from AI. Most people don't keep this context window in mind because it's also not that easy to see. It doesn't give you this information clearly on the LLMs at this point. But, with this strategic AI collaboration, you need to sort of provide an approach to managing this context so that you're not just hoping that AI retains what you want. You need to have this process. Moving from that single interaction to continuous interactions and using this context window concept is key for you to take that next step in AI use. The context window is only what AI can see, and it's limited in that recent conversation history. It's measured in tokens or word pieces. So when you see a context window, it could be 100,000 tokens. When you use AI, the tokens fill up to that 100,000 token limit, and then that whole window starts to drag. And what was at the beginning of the 100,000 tokens gets dropped off. Okay, so that's where you start to notice that drift, which it's starting to maybe not understand the initial prompt that you had. And so it starts to lose its focus because it's just going based off of where it's drifted. So that's where you start to see the forgettability, It doesn't have that persistent memory like humans, where we can commit something to memory and keep it until we die, which is a really remarkable ability for the human brain. Unfortunately, AI isn't quite there. We can store something digitally forever, but to give one single AI conversation that context forever, it's not actually that good. And you don't necessarily want that, because if the context is fixed, it will always think about that context in every future thing that we do. For humans, we can recall a memory, use it, and then let it go. And we don't commit that context into everything else that we do from that point on. But AI works a little bit differently. These long conversations introduce this thing called context drift. It gradually shifts away from the original constraints and the requirements. So that's why it's so key to understand this and the context window that you're working within, so that if things start to drift, you can take action immediately so that you don't lose that magic that you found. So the 4 context categories that transforms the results. So there's that industry context, there's the personal context, there's the project context, there's the audience context. So giving them all these things gives a very specific understanding of how it's supposed to react. Those prompting frameworks and those advanced techniques that we use. But we need to understand what context those different techniques and frameworks and prompts use. Okay, so generally, when you provide a prompt, you can have a way of understanding how many tokens are being input, so you can understand what part of that window is being used just from that initial prompt and every other prompt that you're doing, and then output tokens as well. So you can do the broad math and understand where that context window is and when you need to act. I'm going to talk about front-loading versus progressive context strategies, and they're 2 very different approaches for managing context. So the first one is provide that comprehensive context up front for focused single outcome interactions. If you think you can accomplish the task within that first interaction and within that context window, this is a really good approach. You don't have to do more planning on how you're going to be re-upping context throughout a longer conversation, although you can combine both approaches, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So the progressive strategy is to build context throughout the situation for exploratory or evolving discussions. You can give it some context, start the conversation, feed it more context, iterate, refine that, and understand where the context window is. And then you don't have to worry as much about losing that initial context at the beginning of the conversation as you do with the front loading. The hybrid approach is giving it that really good prompt at the beginning so that it knows exactly what you need, and then progressively feeding it the context from that beginning into it, reminding it what the constraints are, what the audience is, what the situation is, has it changed, all these different things as you collaborate and have this longer conversation. And then a really key piece to this, and if this is another sort of advanced technique, is when you start to get at the maximum boundary of that context window, you should really think about summarizing everything that you've done in that context window. So I use a program called Claude. It's a LLM, and they have a really smart way of managing the context window where you can actually compact the conversation. It takes everything within the context window and compacts it into a summary of its most important context and carries it forward to a new conversation so that you retain the context, but only occupy a small amount of the next context window. This program does this automatically, but if you're using another LLM that doesn't do this automatically, then you can actually prompt it to compact or summarize the context window in which you've been operating in the most insightful or important context and bring it forward into a new chat, and you sort of retain that magic or as much as you can so that you can continue that strategic collaboration and not start to drift away and just lose it. Because the danger is if you really start to drift, there's no getting that context back. It's gone forever. You have to start all over, and that can be really frustrating. So these approaches maintain that critical information through complex, multi-stage conversations that extend beyond AI's natural context window. So periodically ask AI to summarize those key decisions and verify accuracy before continuing. Start a new conversation with the condensed essential context when sessions become unwieldy or long. Checkpoint technique. Explicitly restate critical constraints at decision points to prevent that drift from that initial context, and maintain external reference documents for copy and paste context refreshing. That's that context database that we were discussing in an earlier module. So a couple applications of these context management techniques are strategic planning sessions that span multiple meetings and decision points, complex project development that requires iterative refinement, scope creep, changes in stakeholder engagement or feedback from them, research initiatives building knowledge progressively across multiple information sources, and problem-solving conversations that evolve as new information becomes available. So context refresh and management techniques enable that sophisticated AI collaboration that maintains strategic consistency across extended timeframes, rather than losing critical information midway through really important processes or decisions. So this is a really key piece to understanding how AI is evolving in business. Okay, we've gone through the prompt engineering growth phase of AI. What I've seen now is clients talking a lot about context management because they really see these impactful decisions or impactful applications of AI needing to extend across a larger time frame. We can't get very far with AI just within 100,000 tokens or even 1 million. We need to understand how to continuously get value out of AI within a business context, especially as things are evolving and changing. So this is just a simple way to try to enhance AI's memory so that we can get even better results. So here's how to create this reusable context asset to scale in AI capabilities across your professional responsibilities and team collaborations. So the company context bank. So if you're working at a business or in a role, make standard descriptions of organizations, products, services, third-party vendors, culture, a competitive position, audience context database, detailed profiles of key stakeholders, customers, decision makers, communication preferences. You can start to integrate these context databases or banks into the workflows so that it's almost automated, that you can just start to feed in that context, re-up it so that it knows what it's talking about. A well-maintained context database system can take you to that next level. Use these techniques in a standard approach where you're standardizing the quality of the context that goes in as well. So relevance testing, regularly evaluate whether the provided context is actually improving response quality. Ensure that context explanations are clearer than the concept they're meant to clarify. So that's a pretty important one. You don't want the context that exists within your database to be more confusing than what it understands just naturally. Update with discipline. Maintain that context religiously and perform these audits regularly. Use some sort of effective measurement. Standardize your approach to testing what context is doing to your outputs so that you can evaluate how to get better outcomes by tweaking that context, not just in that specific use case, but across use cases in your organization or life. Start with the minimal, essential context and add elements based on observed improvement in AI and evaluate those responses. Remove context that doesn't demonstrably improve outcomes. This is important because what we found when you give it context, it lives in its memory and it processes everything through that context. If you have something irrelevant, it may just start to add that into every response, giving you useless output because it's not needed. So you go to that context and start to manage that really carefully so you're not getting irrelevant or useless responses. Start to think about version control. Create templates, save them, back them up, make changes, evaluate. If you need to go back to those other versions, go for it. I want to get into more advanced context management for strategic applications. And these are really sophisticated techniques to enable AI conversations to support really high-level strategic thinking and complex decision-making. So create multi-perspective context. Provide stakeholder viewpoints to ensure AI considers diverse perspectives in its decision-making. Take those different context banks and see how they interact. Historical context integration. Reference previous projects, lessons learned, organizational knowledge as context. So this is diving into the data that you already have in your organization and making the most of it and carrying it forward in these strategic decisions. Unfortunately, as the project manager, I see this cast aside at the end of projects, not capturing those lessons learned or enhancing that organizational knowledge. Everyone just celebrates that the project is done, but they don't effectively carry on what we've learned into the next project that might be similar. The best organizations do this really well. And it's only going to accelerate those organizations who do it well because AI is going to supercharge the ability to apply the learnings into projects or across the organization. Next is constraint hierarchy. Prioritize context elements to help AI make trade-off decisions appropriately. Start to structure how you're putting that context into the window so that it naturally or explicitly prioritizes context based on what you need and what you tell it. This stakeholder takes priority over this stakeholder, and you provide those contexts so it can help you manage those relationships and understand if we're prioritizing this, we need to think about these specific considerations. Okay. Next is dynamic context adaptation. So adjust the context based on conversation evolution and emerging insights. That's keeping a dynamic point of view into the context. This one can be more of an art than these other systematic approaches because you're going to start to feel when you're providing AI new information, how it's processing it in that conversation. And you can start to steer the AI to understand, okay, I've given you new information, but actually the information that I gave you at the beginning is still a priority over this new information. So let's remind the AI of that really important information. And then it's going to start to process, everything else based on that priority, the new information, and whatever you're asking for. So really keep an eye and feeling on how AI is interacting with the previous information within that window so that you can start to sculpt it based on your experience working with AI. Some of the really powerful strategic applications of these advanced techniques are executive decision support, requiring consideration of multiple stakeholder perspectives. Some really key decisions that are made can really be enhanced and have this holistic coverage with AI. Complex project planning, integrating lessons learned from previous similar initiatives. Strategic analysis requiring understanding of organizational history and competitive dynamics, and innovation discussions building on existing intellectual property and market positioning. When you really start to give AI your specific context in a very structured way and evaluating the results, you're going to start to unlock this next sort of strategic capability of AI to really act in a few different areas, to come together with all of this context and give you output that you just never imagined was possible when we think back to the original prompt engineering module. This really takes your capability with AI and your organization's capability with AI to just an incredible level. So you now possess this framework for managing AI context that will enable those strategic, productive conversations over a longer time frame. Some of these key points are, you've mastered the foundation of this prompt engineering and context engineering. Now we're going to start to cover how these frameworks work together, and you can apply them immediately within your organization. So you now have these foundational capabilities. Let's start to apply them in ways in your organization that really drive value. Up until this point, we've talked about concepts, but what we really want with AI is that enhancement, that like getting something really useful, really valuable out of it. When we started this journey, I think we thought that might be impossible. That AI is a bit of a cool magic trick, but you can't really get good things out of it that'll really move the needle in your life or your business. But I hope now you can really see that you can, and people are, and you should try, because things are moving quickly. And you may find that if you're not doing these things, that you're feeling like you're not on the same level as other people or other organizations. But don't let that be the primary motivator for your growth here. Really make your growth inspired by the amazing transformation that you can have as a person and an organization to just approach things in a much more holistic, comprehensive way that just makes things actually easier for you. It gives you more free time to apply your expertise and your strategy into the conversation. It really just allows you to feel empowered by this technology. I've been working with this deeply for now years, and the feeling you get when you start to master these techniques, it's hard to describe. You just feel like you can do anything, and it's only going to get more powerful. So let's start this journey together and get us all to a place where we're operating on that master level. And then as a community, we can achieve anything we want together. So thanks for joining me on today's module on context. There's some more information in the description with a link to some more about myself and some of the resources that I've created that you can use along this journey. I've written some books on these things within personal and professional context, but also within project management and product management. So please take a look at those if you're interested. Join my community and share your thoughts on some of these topics. Is there a different way that you think about managing context? Are there any other advanced techniques that you can share with us? What sort of that aha moment or that unlocking was for you in relation to context? I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.